Hello, all of you beautiful beings of light. Welcome back to the show. If you're new here, I'm Victoria. I am an angelic walk-in. I'm a spiritual luminary, 4-time author, and I do inspirational teaching. I'm a spiritual counselor, and I help people with issue resolution. I am here on behalf of the freedom of humanity. And so if you want to learn more about me, you can find me on victoriareynolds.com. I've got a free book over there called Rise Up. That's going to be there for the next couple of weeks. And then I'm replacing it with something entirely new. And I can't tell you what the name of that is yet because I'm still working on it. I do have another book I just finished. It's called Metatron's Cube, Your Blueprint for a New Earth. That one right now is in the editing process. So I'm always writing something, I swear. So if I'm not writing a book, I'm writing a newsletter. And if I'm not writing a newsletter, I'm writing a blog, but I'm pretty much always writing when I'm not here on camera. And when I'm not writing, I'm raising kids. So that's my life. Anyway, you can find me on victoriareynolds.com if you have issues, need help resolving. I do also offer one-on-one sessions as well. Today, our guest is Celine O'Donovan. She is going to be talking about the gifts of trauma. And I know that sounds really strange because, for most of us looking at our trauma, all that we can see is all the pain and suffering it has brought us. But those of us who have gone through the trauma and have done the shadow work and the processing around it understand that there are actually some beautiful gifts that can be found within the trauma itself. So I'm going to bring Celine in to talk about her trauma and the issues that she faced and how she was able to come through it on the other side as a beautiful, positive being who is now assisting others with their own life. So let's bring in Celine. Good morning, Celine. I don't know if it's morning your time or not.
It's evening. Good evening. It's 7 o'clock here on the west coast of Ireland.
I thought that's where you were calling in from.
Yes, so lovely to meet you, Victoria.
It's lovely to meet you as well. And thank you so much for being here. I know that when we do these international shows, sometimes the time can be really, really tricky. So I'm glad we found a time that works for both of us. This is my normal time on Fridays. And so just to let all of you know, we're not going live today because I have a package that might be arriving during this recording. So normally on Fridays, we go live at 11. Today, it's going to be recorded and be placed on afterward, just in case we get interrupted during this time. It's like waiting for the cable guy, right? You never know when they're going to show up. So, Celine, thank you so much for being here. I'm looking forward to hearing your story. I know you've written a book about your story, and let us know that how you're of service to the rest of humanity as well, because I know that once we realize that our trauma isn't just for us, it's for the rest of humanity as well. So what's the name of the book again?
So the book is called Gifts from the Devastation. I'll just hold it up there for the audience to see. So you can see there's a nice sunflower on the front, which very much typifies where I'm at now, having come through a very challenging journey. I picked the sunflower because, as we know, the sunflower follows the light. And that's very much where I feel I'm just very grateful to be in this place in my life. So I wanted something bright and uplifting, coming out of a devastation. But that's what the reader, that's the overall message that they'll get. There's hope and there's joy at the end of every struggle.
Absolutely. Yes. And it gets referred to as, I call it our personal holy shift. When I was going through it, I called it my midlife rebirth. So there is certainly a rebirthing that happens when we go through those experiences, and they are awakening experiences that bring us home to the truth of who we really are, rather than what maybe society has told us we need to be. So these traumatic experiences can actually be vital for our spiritual growth, because they bring us to our knees and then bring us home to the truth of who we really are. And so what kind of work are you doing now with your story? Are you coaching people? Are you?
I'm getting into that. I actually have been, this is my second book. So, and then I trained as a life coach. so I initially trained as a life coach really to support myself as I was going through this, because I knew once I had come through this process, the breakdown, the breakthrough, the rebuilding, the coming home, I then also wanted to develop tools for myself and also that I can share with others. So my passion really, it's evolving, as you know, once you start going on this journey, like 2016, so it's not that long ago, it's 6 years ago, and so much has happened in such a short space of time. I often say to people, it happened, I know, many people I know, a lot happened around that time, because I know I was being prepared for this bigger collective awakening that's happening on the planet, and that I am here to be of service in that, and that's why I have gone through what I've gone through. So it's sort of evolving. It's difficult to say. I have a big passion for teenagers and young people, because I used to work in a university and my job was to go to schools, support teenagers and students making decisions about education. But I began to find that very limiting, and I began to feel very frustrated by the educational system and the limitations, and it's more an indoctrination system than an education system. So that was sort of in the lead up to my breakdown. Let's say all of these things started to fall apart. So I'd like to see myself maybe more as a guide to those maybe who've gone through cancer, trauma, and young people, I believe. I don't feel, I didn't get that support when I was young. You know, I was very sensitive, like many of us were, and I felt a lot, and I shut down very young. And I didn't have the support or the education there to help me go on that journey until later in life. Now, that was my path and that was what I chose. But I would love to be of service in a way to young people, helping them get in touch with those gifts. And I just did a show yesterday with Mark Ashwood, who's in the UK but based in Ireland, and Sherry Diffband, who I know, I'm sure you know, on her Aramis Creative Learning. And I just was so drawn to that. That just lit me up, you know, talking to her. So I'm just feeling something growing on that, in that area as well. I just feel a strong desire to work with young people.
That's wonderful. And a lot of them are going to be experiencing more trauma, and they're going to need to know how to work through it.
Yeah.
And it really is okay on the other side. Not only is it okay on the other side, it can be really, really beautiful and wonderful on the other side of the trauma.
Yes.
So this time that young people are living through right now is it's a very difficult time right now for kids, because it is so confusing. And I don't think the younger generation has experienced something like this since the Vietnam War.
Yeah.
So having to go through this. It's a different kind of war. It's a war on consciousness rather than a physical war, but it's still a war, and the kids are still being traumatized by it.
Yes. And as you said, it's not a very physical, obvious war. So many, I don't think, even realize, you know, don't they not, you know, I think there's a lot yet to come in the coming years. Like, we've no sense. But what I get a strong sense of, and I'm seeing it more and more, the more I have come back and healed my trauma and come back into my body, and I'm really, and sort of feeling myself moving back really from ego, I suppose, personality, more into the spirit, I can very quickly sense when I meet people who are quite disconnected. I was the exact same, very disconnected or dislocated in their lives, where they've sort of come out of their body because of the trauma, unbeknownst to them, and are quite depressed or anxious, and they don't know what's going on, but they're very out of touch with how they're feeling. And I think that's the key, isn't it? Like, that was the key for me as well, to come back into my body, to know that it was safe, to be supported, to be helped, and to know that if I felt, because I had a lot of pain before I ever went near cancer, as most of us do, we all of us deal with emotional pain, but I always believed that this pain would kill me if I actually went into feeling it, because sometimes I prolonged it, I suppose, by not feeling it, and I didn't know how to, and until I got help and until I was ready, it's absolutely, as you said, there's so much more on the other side than you can dare to imagine. And also the empowerment that comes with it, isn't it? To know that you have everything you need inside. I never knew that. You know, I have all these abilities and tools and gifts, I've everything I need. Once I plug out from the outer world and the matrix, as we say, um, where my attention always was in the material world, and sort of started to move. But something had to happen to be the catalyst for that. And for me, that was cancer. It had to be a very big breakdown, because none
Mm-hmm.
of the smaller breakdowns had worked for me. I was, and I think most of your listeners probably identify with it. We all get caught up on the treadmill and the rat race, and I always knew there was a higher calling for me. I knew it from a very young age. I just didn't know how to access it, and I just shut it down. Isn't it? It's sort of survival in the world that we're.
Yeah. So what happened to you is what I call it the spiritual 2x4 to the back of the head, right? So
Yes,
so spirit's trying to give us little nudges, little nudges, little nudges, and if we're not listening, then we get the big one, which is so you probably were getting little prompts along the way and you weren't hearing. So you got the cancer 2x4 to the back of your head. That was like, oh, okay, wow, okay, and that's what. Again, that's the awakening, the big awakening experience that literally brought you to, that crushed you, and then, right, then that's what it took to wake you up. And sometimes that's what it takes for some people.
yeah,
Not everyone, awakening experiences don't have to be that painful, but for some people, that's what it takes. So
yeah,
we're actually experiencing that collectively right now. Like the whole
yes,
humanity is experiencing a wake-up call. And they're really uncomfortable to go through.
yeah, yeah. And you can feel it, can't you, collectively in the atmosphere and in the energy. Like I was out for the first time today, really out and about. I was in bookshops and signing my book, and I was really out meeting a lot more people. And I realized how much I've shifted even in the last few years. I could just feel, I was very sensitive to what was going on, and you can just see as a lot of people are in this, oh, we're going back to normal type of hoping, in their mind, oh, everything's fine, we're going back to normal, and you're, I don't, there's no going back, we never go back, but, there's still, there's different stages, isn't it? I've met many people. I met a lady yesterday who literally just woke up through a WhatsApp group that I'm in. I mean, it was unbelievable. There was a group of us who were at a creatives retreat, and most people were at different levels of awakening on it. And someone put a message in about somebody yesterday, and you could just see, she said, oh my God, I can't believe I'm just beginning to see what you're saying. And everything, she just said, I'm just going to need a bit of time to absorb it. But something, and it was just one comment someone made, so she was ready. It was, and I'm sure you are, I'm seeing people sort of popping more and more around me.
Yeah.
But at different stages, isn't it? There's lots of different stages to awakening to yourself and to who you truly are, and to awakening to what's happening really in the world and what this is. And I know that's still unfolding for me. I don't claim to know anything. All I ever want to do is share my story of what I happen to have found and how I've done that. And I'm sure I'll continue with more in future books, because like you said at the beginning, writing is now my way of expressing myself. I never expressed myself creatively. And isn't it? It's such a gift. Such a gift. And that's what I say to people. Like if you had said to me 5, 6 years ago that I'd be writing or doing anything like I'm doing, I said you were crazy. So, this, isn't it? It's like what you said. Yeah, once I did need the major 4x4 on the back of my head. But it's what I needed. And I said to people at the beginning, that's why I called the book Gifts from the Devastation, because obviously to get difficult, I'm not trying to diminish difficult news, any sort of difficult news. And it was devastating, but very quickly I felt relief. And I've said this to a lot of people, because something in me knew. I had known for a couple of years. I had a car accident, quite a serious car accident 2 years before. I literally hit a wall. So I was, and I knew I was being, come on, stop. And I still went back, and that's what I needed. But yeah, it's just been such a journey of, on so many levels. It really has. just been amazing.
So what you got hit with, and it's funny that you talk about the writing, it felt like for me when I first started writing, like I had turned on a tap. It's this tap that's constantly flowing. And every once in a while, I get stumped. I do a weekly newsletter, and sometimes I'm like, man, I got nothing. Like, why am I getting nothing? Then I'm like, okay, what is it that? And for me, then I kind of tune in and I ask Spirit, okay, what is it that you want me to teach people right now? Because I'm not getting, and then something starts flowing through.
Yeah.
But I think it's working on so many different creative projects that sometimes, like, tuning in on just one thing, because my newsletters are, 4 or 5 paragraphs. They're not that long. It's not like writing a book where I get in a flow and then you're writing for hours at a time. So sometimes I get writer's block there, which is really interesting. But like you, when I first started writing, someone told me I had at least a dozen books in me, and I said, that's ridiculous. I just have this one. It's one that I've been actually working on for years, and I'm still working on. But in the meantime, I've written 4 others, and then I just finished another one, and I'm working on another one. I have another one up here that I haven't started working on. So I think once you turn on that creative flow, that it's like turning on a tap. It's just always there. You can just sit and be quiet, and then it just starts flowing through. Sometimes it requires something major in our life to turn that tap on. Because the creativity gets stuck when we go into our heart space, which is what gets woken up when we have these traumatic incidences. The heart starts opening up, and that's what we start to create from. So if I think a lot of people who don't understand the creative process, they think it's a mental thing, and it's not. It's actually here in our hearts. When we tap into that inner space, that's when the creativity starts to flow. Whether you're an author or a painter or an artist or a filmmaker, the creativity it's in here.
Yes, very much so. Because as well, I was saying, exactly that. Because my mind was so busy before I was diagnosed, and my body, I was literally going 1,000 miles an hour. I couldn't. My mind never stopped. It was just burnout. I'm like, I could literally feel my nervous system, everything just, hitting overload. And when I got the diagnosis and I started treatment and I was living alone, it was amazing. My body powered down, and about a couple of months later, my mind started to power down. And it was like someone took me, like I said, and just said, okay, you get out of the driving seat for a while now. You're just burnt out. We're going to take over. You just rest there. And that's when I say to people, something started to break open in me. So it was once the mind went quiet, I could feel it. I could literally feel, there's a space. What's going on? I felt very peaceful. Now I wasn't writing at that stage. There was a sort of a letting go. I could just really feel, it's like I took my hands off the steering wheel and said, I can't. I remember sitting in the car one day going, I can't do this anymore. And it was like a feeling of falling. And literally it was, so I always see that was the starting point of, as you said, me beginning to sort of go back into the heart. And then it was what really triggered it, and I really believe, I know we're always shown the next step, and if we cannot find it, sometimes we're sent to people, because I knew once I made that decision inside, I'm letting go, just show me, I'm ready. And within a few weeks, or quite quickly after treatment, I bumped into someone I hadn't seen in 20 years, and she mentioned that a friend was doing a course, The Artist's Way, which you might have heard of.
That's a great book, yeah.
And that was really because I was lost. I had huge fatigue. I couldn't go back to my job. And I said, I'm not an artist, though. I don't know if this course is for me. And she said, no, it's not about that. It's helping you. Everybody's an artist of their life. It's really about bringing you back in touch with yourself and your creativity. And that was what started me. I still didn't know. And it was about 6 weeks into the course, the lady who was running it said to me, would you ever think of writing? You're always talking about what you've learned from this experience. And I was like, me? Yes. No, sure, I've never written anything. And I went home, and she obviously had unlocked something in me, because I just picked up my laptop and, like you said, I sat down and like someone had turned the tap on, and it was just, yeah, poured out. Um, so it was just, and that literally within a few months. So it was sort of a roundabout. It's only taken to me now to publish it, because what happened was I had it written, I had a draft. I wasn't too sure what to do. I went to a publisher in Galway where I live, and there was a self-publisher, and she read it, and she said, come in and we'll have a chat about it. And she said, you can write, absolutely, but I'm going to suggest something a little bit you might find a bit strange. Would you think of writing fiction? And I looked at her, I said, fiction? I'm just after writing my life story. Why would I, I didn't say anything, but at the time I was so sort of new to this and I really didn't know. And I said, okay, why not? I'll give it a go. And as I went home, I could hear all these voices of characters nearly coming alive.
Wow.
Yeah, like people's, little stories. And I knew, by the time I got home, I knew this book is going to be about community, because that's what it was. It ended up being about the power of community and the people in our lives. And I called it the tapestry of life, because it's really about how we all weave in and out and make up. We're each individual threads, in the overall tapestry. And we don't know why people come into our lives, because that's exactly what had happened to me. Mm-hmm. But I didn't. And I hadn't written, so I understand why it happened that way, because I needed to firstly build up a bit of confidence in my writing. I went to a writing course. I needed space from, I was very soon after cancer, so I hadn't really processed or maybe absorbed or learned and matured enough to finish the book. Still a little too raw and too fresh. So I published the first book in 2019. Then we go into lockdown, and I spend 2020 editing and finishing this book. And the title and I do feel there's a timing to it coming out, because we are in the midst of a collective devastation for many, and many people are not yet seeing the gifts. And I didn't plan this, but I do know that it's not a cancer story. I mean, it's obviously very relevant to anyone going through cancer, because cancer was my story. I had lots of other devastations. It's really about, as you said, coming through a trauma. And I wrote it in 3 parts. So I wrote it as in my life leading up to it, what it was like, and I'm sure many people could relate to it, a lot of the struggles and strains and battles that were going on within me, and yet I looked to have it all on the outside, a good career, I had my own home, all of these things. But I was burning out, it wasn't working. And then I take people through the devastation. What happened when I broke down? What started to come to life in my life, I suppose. And then the third stage of the book is, okay, once you come out the other end and you're transformed, how do you go about co-creating your life? What are the things? Because I knew I couldn't go back to my old life, but I didn't know how to go forward either. I didn't know how to trust. I was in this new way of being in the world, and I didn't understand how it worked. So I was sort of feeling my way, which is the way I do. I live from my heart now, and I feel, and I sort of co-create in that way. But I had to learn that, I had to go through it, and I'm still learning, before I could finish the book. So I suppose, there was always a higher intelligence behind it all, obviously.
Yeah. As you were talking, one of the things that I noticed was you said there was a point where you just had to let go. And that, to me, that reminds me of when I was going through my own stuff, and a friend of mine was talking about surrendering. And I was like, Mom, I'm not going to surrender. That means I'm giving up. And she said, no, that's not what surrender means. And I had to really understand the difference between surrendering, which to me meant waving a white flag and that I was quitting and that I was letting somebody else win, and this idea of just letting it go and surrendering it to spirit. And that's what people mean when they say give it over to God. Let it go and give it over to God. Surrender it to the divine, surrender it to spirit. And you did that, where you just finally said, you know what? I'm just going to let go.
Yeah.
And that when you do that letting go and you stop trying to control the situation, that's when spirit's able to get in and start working with you. because before that, your ego was trying to control the whole thing. But you saw what happened as soon as you let go. That's when your heart space started to open up. That's when your creativity started to open up. And one of the things I think it's important for people to understand is that we are creators, all of us. That's how we're made in the image of the creator. We're all creators. We're always so busy trying to force things. And when we just stop and let go and go within and get quiet, that's when we have the ability to start creating. So that's how that tap got turned on, because you finally let go.
Yes, yes, yeah, yeah. And I had been fighting with life for many years, you know. I knew it, but I didn't know how to find the other way. And I think many people, you know, I don't know. I suppose it's different for everyone, and maybe there's, you know, I do believe there's a divine timing when the light goes on. You know, you can't. I would never try to force this on anyone else. As someone described it to me, it's like a shell with a fish, you know, a seafood or something, and you try to pry that open, it will clamp, you know, closed even tighter. So I know if anyone had tried to say, probably like you said there, oh, surrender, Celine, or do whatever, I would have, what? No way, you know, because I was a survivor. My marriage broke down very young. It was a very traumatic breakup. And I buried a lot of that. And something in me said, okay, the only way you're going to get through life is on your own, independent, fight. I don't remember consciously doing that, but I know something inside of me believed. I felt very let down by life, and this was the only way. You know, how could you do this to me? You know, and I remember it because I remember lying in a corner one day, like howling like an animal. I can remember the pain was just so, anyone who knows, you know, that's the physical pain. So that became my modus operandi for the next 10, 12 years, I would say. And as I said, culminated, I dealt with anxiety, addiction, depression, unhealthy relationships, poor boundaries, car accident, you name it, I went through it. And it did take cancer for me to finally understand surrendering, as you said, and letting go. And that's when the beauty, isn't it? That's when the beauty, the joy, the essence, it just opens up again. The grip of the ego, isn't it? Sort of I could feel it. It sort of recedes. And it's like, isn't it, that energy takes over. I knew it. Once I said, yes, I choose this, that joined me. And just this, it's not that you have to be doing, you know, as we always say, the doing comes from a whole different place. Like you're saying, co-creation, isn't it? It's that's the joy that I had no idea lay ahead for me. And maybe a lot of people don't know that until it happens for you, isn't it? Until you experience it.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know,
absolutely.
Yeah. And like you said, maybe some people, I don't know too many people. I don't know if you do, who, you know, everybody has different types of awakenings, as you said, and they're very unique. But it seems to be the case for many people. There is, I know there can be spontaneous awakenings, but often it does involve some sort of trauma.
Mm-hmm. I tend to refer to it as the death of something.
Yeah.
You know, usually it's the death of something. If it's the death of a business or your health or a family member or something, you know, and what's going to be happening collectively is the death of all of our systems. And that is going to be very traumatic for people to face, because that's been their support system their entire life. So it usually involves that. And then what people need to understand is, if there is a death, in my case, it was the death of a business, and dreams, the death of a dream. So there is a grieving process that goes through that as well. And that is a perfectly normal part of getting through the trauma, getting through the experience, and getting to the other side, to this beautiful place of peace that exists on the other side, and to just be in the awareness that the grieving process is a normal part of the awakening experience. But what a lot of people try to do is they try to fight that, because the ego wants to fight the anger and the sadness and all of that goes with it. And the more we don't fight that, the easier we can move through it, and the quicker we can move through it.
Yes, yeah. And I found I probably was doing a lot of fighting long before cancer. When cancer came, I was just ready. It literally happened, I could say, once I got the news, shock, went home, sitting in my house, and I'd say a week later, I just went, everything just stopped. It was like years and years of fighting. I mean, I often say to people, a few people ask me, do you think that you could have gone back to your old life, that you might have? And I it's very hard. And people did expect it, because I understand that. Why wouldn't they? They didn't see that's the way they looked at life. Why wouldn't she go back? I worked in marketing for years. She's a great pensionable job. Why wouldn't she go back? And I found it quite difficult to say to people, I can't go back. There's no going back. I couldn't even, I really struggled with that. And, I think it takes a lot of courage and a lot of bravery to go on this path, because you're really choosing you're facing your traumas, you're facing the pain, you're really facing, and you're alone. Like, it's really helped me in the last few years, because I had chosen a path of sort of sovereignty and truth quite a few years before. So I didn't find it, because in my family I would still be probably the only one who would look at what's happened in the last few years very differently to how they see it and where they're at, and that's fine. But it just hasn't made it that easy. There's so many people I know in the same boat. But it did help me, because I knew at a very deep level, no, I have to follow my truth. And doesn't it happens that I knew the truth very quickly. I just found I knew it, because I'd sort of gone back into that place of resonance and trusting what I felt. And it wasn't an intellectual, like as you said, it wasn't a mind thing. I just knew from day one. Like, it doesn't matter what anyone says to me. And that's it's a beautiful place to get to, isn't it?
It really is. Just to really trust yourself enough to know that it doesn't really matter what anybody else says, or even what else is happening externally.
Yeah, exactly.
Really grasp, that happiness really is an inside job, and it really doesn't have anything to do with our circumstances. That sometimes it takes us having these really, really painful circumstances to understand, it doesn't have anything to do with the circumstances.
No.
It has everything to do with how we approach them.
Yes.
And what we learn from them, and how we move through them, and how we perceive them. But it isn't the circumstances themselves that bring us happiness or unhappiness.
No.
It's not our perception as we're moving through them.
Yeah, it's so true, because the biggest message for me in the book, and it kept coming to me as I was writing it, is that life is always happening for me, not to me. And that was the biggest shift for me, because I always felt everything was happening to me, that I was a victim, and look at so and so. And yet, to anyone looking on the outside, I seem to have this charmed life of, like we look at many others. But it was never about that, because I said to people, I was often on beautiful holidays, sitting in lovely locations, and so miserable. I couldn't sit with myself. I physically couldn't sit with myself. I couldn't find peace. I had no peace inside. And I mean, it doesn't matter, no money, no possessions, no body can give you that. I mean, that is the greatest gift, isn't it? That sense of peace and calm. And I find it very hard to give that away. I don't know if you found that now. People probably see me as a little bit of not a hermit or a loner, but I'm very selective about the company I keep, because I have worked so hard to get to this place of feeling quite joyful most of the time. I really am. And so there's so much going on in my inner world. It is the same, and it's not a noisy mind. It's just a beautiful flow state. And I would have had no boundaries with people. I mean, there was a whole imbalance in my life. Whatever anyone needed, I gave it, because I believed that was my role. And I've seen the difference now in relationships. A lot of relationships, I know many people find this as well, have fallen away for people in the last few years. And but I'm okay with that now. I just know it's not about the other person. I just have to be truthful to me. It's not a criticism criticism of them or anything like that.
Right.
It's no, I just have to honor me. And in doing this, someone said to me, in saying yes to yourself, you're saying yes to the other person, because who knows what they maybe need to learn from themselves that they won't learn if both of you stay entangled together.
Right.
So this is there.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's been something beautiful in that, in the relationships, and I think that's a big part of it. It's just when there's so many layers, but even the healing of the trauma and the feeling, that's a big part of my life, becoming very embodied again. I was not at all grounded or in my body, and I follow a very deep breathwork practice now quite regularly because I need that, because I feel a lot, and I know I need to keep it moving. Just keep the energy moving, keep the energy moving. If it gets stuck, that's when I'm in trouble. But that's just been, it's just been so profound. It's so profound, the shifts and the creativity. I always come back. I always say to people, each one of us are just we're just an aspect of source. And we're such a unique aspect, and we have to, this idea of competition. There's nothing to do with competition. I benefit if you share your gifts and shine. Everybody benefits when we all shine.
Absolutely.
And isn't that the world we're moving into? That's where we're going.
Absolutely. Yeah. The whole concept of competition was created to keep us separate, to keep us from actually finding the true divinity that's in every single one of us. Competition is actually a false narrative.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people are starting to understand that. It's a narrative that was created in the fear-based reality to keep us afraid and to keep us from unifying. And there are a whole bunch of us that are saying, I'm not buying it anymore.
Yeah.
We happen to know that's not true. Human beings are born compassionate. We learn competition. So we're going back now to the truth of who we are, our true nature as compassionate, cooperative, creative beings. So another question that I have for you is, in your book, do you talk about how you were able to beat this cancer situation? Are you in remission now? What is the status with that? And do you talk about the process you used to get to the other side where you are now?
Yes, I mean, to me, cancer really was it wasn't just a physical illness, it wasn't a random illness, it was a very much a manifestation, and I'm very conscious. I've talked to a lot of women, so everybody has a different perspective on what cancer or illness means in their life. For me, when I got cancer, it was the first time my life made sense, because I knew mind, body, spirit, everything is connected. So the fact that what I had been feeling for years finally manifested in a cancer in my body, I went, okay, I'm not going crazy. I thought there was something wrong with me because I couldn't fit in and I couldn't make sense of this world. And I see it now as sort of creative energy, that creative source energy was suppressed. And where did it go? It manifested in a lump in my breast, and it was on the right side of my body, which I know is very much the male energy channel, and I was very much in my male, doing, forcing, pushing. I was totally out of balance, so that totally made sense to me. So I do take the reader through everything I did, because I did go through conventional treatment. There was a part of me that didn't want to. I had embraced a very holistic, natural life, and I went to a healer first. But I ultimately, so I share all of that with the reader, what decisions I made, how did I approach it. Yes, I went through, and I understand, I went to a lady, she calls herself a spiritual midwife. She is a spiritual midwife, as I was making the decision about how I would approach treatment, because I knew this was much more than just, a physical.
Right.
At the very beginning, and I said, look, I don't know about treatment. One part of me feels I know I can heal this myself. But then I had consultants shouting at me, well, not shouting at me, but saying to me, it's gone into your lymph nodes. So it had spread in my case beyond the breast. So, they were putting, and they meant well, but they were putting a sense of urgency on me. And then I had other people on the other side saying, but you can heal this yourself. And I know I could, but in the time period. And what she said to me, and this is, I'd say to anyone going through cancer, is there's no right or wrong decision. You choose, like we talked there about coming back into your truth. You make the decision that is right for you, and once you do that, you will be fine.
Mhm.
And what really helped me was she said, look, Celine, it's not a right or wrong, go for conventional treatment or don't. You know, whatever you go through is what you're going to need to experience as part of your life path and your growth, and maybe what you're going to do in service in the world. And that totally made sense on many levels. Firstly, I needed to be taken out of the system for about 2 years initially, and I was, because I suffered so much fatigue and illness from the treatment, because the treatment is so toxic. That's why I didn't want to go through it. But I understand that had to be my path, because nothing else would have shut me down. I had to be powered down. And a car accident for a month hadn't done it. So Spirit decided, no, we need to take her out for a few years, because nothing else is going to work. There's no point giving her a magical healing, because she'll just go back. She'll be back on the hamster wheel again. So that really helped me go, okay, this isn't, you know, there's no right or wrong here. This is what I need to do. And I can now relate to women. If I had, you know, been talking to women or other people going through cancer going, oh, I had a magical healing, I was back fine. You know? I don't know. I wouldn't have the same credibility, because I've been there. I've, you know, those days and nights on the floor and how awful you feel. So I talk all about the treatment. I talk about holistically how I supported myself, whether it's having the right people around you, getting involved in support groups, how you feed your body. Like I started to learn about nutrition. I was growing my own vegetables and wheatgrass and exploring all of that. I went for a lot of energy healing, kinesiology, spiritual healing, emotional healing. I went to a therapist throughout it. And I suppose I've been lucky. One thing that really saved me is I've never usually had a problem. I might have had problems with people very close to me, maybe sharing what was going on, but I've never had a problem really professionally reaching out to people. You know, that always was very easy. So I reached out, and I would say that to anyone. Just make sure at the very beginning that you reach out for help, because as treatment starts to take its toll, it's very difficult. You become exhausted, and it becomes very hard then to start trying to find your support network. Once you get into treatment, what I found is I needed a lot of time alone. I was so exhausted, but I also needed to know that I was surrounded. It was like I said in that book, the tapestry of life. I sort of knew there was like this invisible web around me, and if I reached out, so it's very important, I would say, at the beginning to sort of put that in place, get your foundations in place. You'll have a little bit of time, and once you do that and look after yourself, body, mind, spirit, emotionally, you'll just know, and then you start to move into that state of flow that we talked about, and you know when, okay, I don't need this anymore, I now need to move on to something else.
Right.
Yeah. So I talked through all of that aspect of cancer, but I also talk about it on so many levels, like I said about, you know, the type of people. So I start each chapter, I'm not going to read anything here to you, but even like the first chapter of the book is called A New Direction. And that was just, I knew I was going in a new direction. Right. And I started with a quote, and I started this chapter with a quote by Mary Oliver, the beautiful poet. Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? So I sort of pick a quote from a well-known poet or author or someone or a spiritual teacher that I admire. And then the end of each chapter, I finish it with a gift. So if the chapter was about, for example, one chapter is about self-care, I'll have, I'll link it in at the end and have a little gift, what was the gift out of sort of, putting a self-care program in place. And
okay.
And I talk about abundance. I talk about every aspect of my life because it's touched every aspect of it.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
As you said, it's not, cancer is my story, but it's not the only story. And everybody's story is going to be different. But trauma is trauma.
Yes. And we all experience it. I don't know anybody that hasn't experienced some kind of trauma in their life. And as you were saying, the question to ask ourselves is why is this happening for me? And people don't ask that question. They ask, why is this happening to me? And it's, why is this happening to me? Rather than really genuinely questioning that question of, why is this happening for me?
Yeah.
And really out of curiosity,
Yeah,
asking why.
yeah. Or even what?
Rather than what a lot of people do is they go into the complaining why, and it's not like they really want to know, that they're just complaining about the situation. But if you approach this situation from real, genuine curiosity of why,
Yeah,
then you can get a completely different answer, and you can see how it actually is for our own good.
yeah.
And that question from that real genuine question of curiosity and how it actually is for our own good, that's when we can start to approach it from a completely different perspective, and as a gift rather than as a trauma, for example. And
Yeah.
sorry, there's a weird noise happening.
Yeah.
And that we can take that same idea and apply it to all the way back to our childhood. Even if the traumatic experience was something that happened to us as children, we can still apply that same approach.
Yes, very true. Yeah, very true. Yeah.
Was this for my good? And we start to discover a completely different way of looking at our experiences.
Yeah. It's amazing, isn't it? When you, I actually, yeah, I haven't gone back and looked at my childhood in much that way, but I have it another way unconsciously, because everything starts to make sense. Like everything has made sense. It's just, it clicks, every different stage you should go, oh yeah. Like I always describe it, I was speaking at an event recently, and the theme that came to me was about freedom on every level. And what came to me was, I don't know if you remember the TV program called Born Free. Joy Adamson out in Africa on safari, and they rescued a cub when his mother died. So he was born free. Then they domesticated him and they raised him, they tamed him, they, like us going through our programming. And then at some point they realized he cannot survive being domesticated. Like his spirit as a lion is not to be domesticated as us, as human beings. And I sort of started to relate my own life to it. And cancer became my call to go back out to the wild. I can't stay in this system. The system isn't serving me any longer. At some point, doesn't it? The human spirit just goes, no, this is costing too much. I'm not designed to live like this. And so cancer was my call to go back out of the wild and to return to living free, which I had known when I was born. But then,
yeah, and a lot of people are starting to recognize that. This is what I call the global freedom movement. A lot of people are starting to recognize, human beings weren't meant to be corralled and boxed in. We were born free. We're meant to be free. Now, for me, I recognized that when I was a child. I couldn't wait to get out of the cult that I was born in, and I knew I needed to be free. And there have been different places throughout my life where I've felt that need for freedom calling me. And right now, like for you, as you were saying, with your cancer, was your call to the wild. So much of humanity is hearing that call right now.
Do you think so? Yeah, I know more and more are waking up,
and they're talking about going off grid and sustainable communities and starting their own schools and starting their own medical clinics. And that is starting to wake up in the collective of humanity. And I think the reason, it's interesting you bring that up, I think the reason that is waking up in the collective of humanity is specifically because of the collective trauma we're experiencing. It's starting to wake people up to the truth that we were all born to be free.
Yes. Yeah, that's it, isn't it? And I can see it playing out collectively. You just go, how much more is it going to take?
I don't know.
But then I go, how much more did it take for me? So who knows? I know.
I mean, is humanity going to need a massive 2x4 in the back of the head? It might.
I know, because I know people are always talking about time frames, and I don't buy into any of that anymore, really. I mean, part of me does, going, but I know it's a process, and it's not about, it's like what you said there. I'm noticing the more that I focus, and we focus as a humanity on what we want to create, the new forms of education, whatever it is you want to do. And I don't put my focus anywhere else. I just focus on what I want to create. And the more of us that do that, then there's no energy feeding the old system. And it will die quicker, isn't that it? Like, It's not, we all know, well, I know at this stage, I think nobody's coming to save us. So we have to rise up. And the sooner we rise up, I can feel it. The more I rise up within myself, isn't it like the microcosm of the macrocosm? You have to master this in your own personal life, and become the creator of your own life and realize who you are before it's going to shift.
Absolutely. And that's why we have these kinds of conversations, because people need to understand that if we want to change the world, it starts inside every single one of us.
Yeah.
And so as soon as enough of us learn how to approach our own trauma with love, the sooner all those old fear-based systems will start to collapse, and the sooner we'll create a new world. People ask me all the time, well, how much longer does this need to be? It's like, well, it's up to us.
Yeah.
It's up to us.
Yeah.
How long it takes for this new world to be created is up to every single one of us.
Yeah.
And just stop focusing on the trauma and everything that's wrong, and figure out how to recognize why is this happening for us, and then we create the world we want to create.
Yeah. And it is happening, isn't it? Because I can feel the shift in many people I knew who would have said they're awake, but we're still focused on fighting the old system. And that's understandable. There's all these phases we go through. But
It's a phase, yeah.
Yeah, you have to go through. But I can see what most people I know who are like-minded, everybody's, I'm done with that. Like, I have no interest.
Tired of fighting.
Yeah, exactly. The tired of fighting, like the tired of fighting I got to with life, where you just have to go hands off. I'm just letting go here.
Right, and this is where people need to understand the difference. It's not like we're surrendering to the enslavement; it's that we're surrendering it to God.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And that, I think, is really important for people to make the differentiation in that.
Yeah.
That letting go of the fight doesn't mean that you're giving up, and that you're giving in. It means that we're allowing now Source, God, Spirit, whatever our name is for the divine, to work through us.
But it's really showing up, isn't it? The sort of the illusion of the false light that so many, we've all lived under for so many years, and
So long.
it's just it's mind-blowing to me as well. Often the revelation of people, as I said, it's made it very easy in life now to see, like, where are people who maybe talked about certain things and who had certain maybe ideologies or ways of speaking. You realize, no, because the light senses the light very, you recognize it. It's of a certain vibration. So it makes it very easy, but it also, I found it quite it takes, there's a fair bit of, like, even to give an example, this friend yesterday who had that sort of sudden wake up, and it was in this message group, and it was about a particular presenter on the mainstream media, and they were suggesting to me, oh, you should contact them about your book. And I assumed they knew, and I went back and I said, no, I won't be going there.
Yeah.
Definitely not into there. And she couldn't understand it. And then someone mentioned someone else in America, and she went, them as well? And you could just see the little cogs were starting to turn, but she was ready because she was asking some questions. But I didn't realize that was going to be the catalyst. I assumed she knew. So just everybody's on, everybody's on a different timeline or a different path, at different stages. But isn't it as well, I've noticed the more that I just focus on radiating that out in my life, that's enough. I would have at the beginning, like we said, trying to wake others up or try to argue about, do you not see? Do you not see? How can you not see?
Yeah.
And then once you let go of that, and I just focus more on me being me, I've noticed more people are drawn back into wanting to talk about things, because I'm not threatening, but they know there's something that they're attracted to, but they don't know what it is.
Yeah.
So that's our job, really, isn't it? Just to be the light and embrace it in our own lives.
Yeah. Yeah, and you can't force anybody else to wake up. Everyone awakens when it's their time. What we can do is be an example of what's possible. That's really all that we can do.
Yes.
And people will start to question that. How is it that you're so happy when you're going through all of this? And then that's when you can open up a conversation and just allow the conversation to go. But a lot of people think that what they have to like shake their family awake or shake their friends awake. We don't have to do that. The experience itself will shake people awake. We are the ones that are here to help them see the light and feel the love through the process.
Yes. And not interfere, isn't it, as well? You know, as I realized, you know, who is it for me to say, you know, the journey they've chosen to go on is
absolutely
wrong.
None of us know each other's path.
I know, yeah.
And nobody know our own. How can we know someone else's?
I didn't know mine, and nobody could have told me any earlier because I was too stubborn. So yeah, that's been a big lesson for me, and you know, I'm learning all the time. But that's been a big lesson, just to respect and honor where other people are, and then it makes it much easier. You can come. Like I happen to be living with my mother right now, and you know, we'd be on different scales of, you know, of what's going on. But it's brought us into so much love because it's taught me, and I said this is what true awakening is. Because there I am in this home with my mother, where I would have wanted to argue with her, and now there's just love because I accept where she is, and that's the unity, isn't it? It's all coming back to unity, and that's how we do this work.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for being here. It has been such a pleasure speaking with you in this conversation, and what you've been through and what you've experienced, and the wisdom that comes from you about your experience. And I do hope that all of you who are watching and listening to this show, if you are choosing to just listen and not watch, I understand, because sometimes we just play YouTube in the background. And that you got something from this, and that every guest I have on the show, I bring on here because I think they have an important message to share as we all individually and collectively move through the human experience. It isn't a piece of cake in the walk in the park for anybody at times, and sometimes it is pure absolute joy. And we're all here experiencing it in alignment with what our soul wants us to experience. So thank you for being here. And for all of you who are watching, remember to be loving and compassionate with yourself, with whatever it is that you're going through, and be understanding and loving and compassionate with the other people in your life as well, because we don't know what other people are facing inside themselves. And as always, remember to hold your light so high others can't help but see their own light. Together we are creating a world of peace, love, harmony, prosperity for all life on earth. And as always, get bold, be fearless, and live free.
Thank you, Victoria.